Sometimes I find myself complaining about things that I wish were different, that God would have done differently or will do differently. But it's not a big deal, is it? In Numbers chapter 11, we learn that complaining is a very big deal for God. The children of Israel began to complain about the manna that God gave them to eat. They started saying, "We remember the leeks and the garlics and the onions in Egypt. It was so amazing." The Bible says this was a mixed multitude. In other words, there were some people who were Israelite and some people who were Egyptian and even other cultures and languages and people who had come into their group. In the same way, in church today, you have a mixed multitude. Jesus described this that there's wheat and there's tares. And there's some people that when it comes to the harvest time, when the angels come and they take the redeemed away, they're not going to be there. They may have been in church, but they weren't redeemed. And so these might be some of the multitude who are complaining, people who don't really know the Lord. But even believers do it. I like what they say. They say, "Who's going to give us meat to eat?" Really? God had been doing that every day. It had been falling on the ground, this food, but they wanted meat. Now here's the truth. If they want meat, they could have provided that for themselves. They could have gone out and killed an animal. God didn't say they couldn't do that. They could have done that. But they remember in Egypt how great it was. Really? You don't remember the slavery in Egypt? You don't remember the taskmasters? That's all you did before was complain. You remember leeks and garlics and onions and how great things were? There's something called false memory syndrome. When you have a tendency to romanticize the past or say the past was worse than it really was. God doesn't want us to look back at the past. He wants us to look at what He's given to us and be grateful for that. Ultimately, what God did was He said, "You know what? You want meat? I'm going to give you so much meat, it's going to rot in your teeth." And the next day, quail flew in, they batted them down, they were eating them, and it just soured in their mouth. When you get what you think you want from God, it isn't usually what you need. Be satisfied. Don't complain. Whatever it is in your life you've been complaining about, if God hadn't done this, if God hadn't allowed this, it's against God. Remember that your complaints are against God. My complaints are against God. And it's such a big deal that a lot of these Israelites died over it. Why don't you make a list today of your 3 biggest complaints and confess that before God and say, "God, I'm sorry I've complained. In fact, I'm going to find things in and around the situation to be grateful for."